Hello. We're having some technical difficulties, excuse me, with this being live streamed. But hello, Guy. Yes. Whatever you want me to say to them, Guy's spirit is here with you today, and I will be passing on what he wants to say. I'm thrilled to be sharing his journey with all of you. And you're probably wondering, who is this guy? And my name is Philip Rubin. My name sign is like this on the chin. And the two of us, Guy and I, have been friends for about 50 years, which is just amazing to me. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping and technical stuff first before we start the journey. We have voice interpreters for folks who don't understand sign language, or if somebody has a little bit of sign language but aren't getting it all, there's closed captions at the bottom. There's a live transcript button that you can just touch and it'll display the captions there at the bottom of your screens. So, okay, with that, I'd like to introduce Guy's sister, Janine, signed like this. Vancouver, Washington is our first stop on the journey. Yes. And this is Janine, Guy's sister, and her husband, Ed Layton. So Janine and Ed, hello. Hi. This is Janine speaking. He's going to do most of the speaking, not me. So do you want to describe some of what we're seeing in the pictures here? That's just, me and my brother with Santa Claus. Okay. Let me take over. This is Ed. Guy was born in Seattle, Washington. And his parents lived there at the time, of course, and he went to school for the deaf in Vancouver, Washington. And he would go by train every weekend back and forth between home and the school. And Janine instead wasn't able to go to the deaf school. She went to a mainstream school because she had too much of a hearing ability. So she stayed with her parents, probably 3 or 4 years later. Their father got an offer to teach bakery skills at the Vancouver School for the Deaf. And so the whole family moved there to Vancouver, Washington. And then Janine tried to get into the school there again, the School for the Deaf, but they said, no, your hearing level is too high and you speak normally like a hearing person would speak. So she had to go to a public school. But she got F's in all her subjects. We don't know if that was on purpose or not, but her parents showed that to the superintendent of the school in Vancouver and said she's not doing well in public school. And so they finally accepted her to go to the Vancouver School for the Deaf. And she was in the same age group as Guy's class was. So do you want to describe a little bit of that time, Janine? Yeah, this is Janine. We were very creative kids, and Guy specifically was very creative. And he thought of the idea of a rocket to the moon. And the whole class decided to get in on the creativity. And he designed everything for the gymnasium. And he thought that the moon should be in one area and the earth should be in this other area. And then there were moving parts to it. Somewhere on the moon, like a moon cart or something, and there was so many loud colors and lights, and all the girls in our class dressed like they were from different planets, Jupiter and Mars and all that. All the senior girls had on different kinds of costumes that way, and he was the Moon King, and I wish I had a picture of that. When we got to the moon, quote unquote, what we did is there was a little motorized cart that had been designed to be in there, and then we would get out, and it was like we were on a rocket to get to the moon. and you could see from the moon, you could look back and see the Earth, and it was just amazing, the design. He had such an eye for design, and he did an optical illusion, so it really looked like we were on the moon looking back at Earth. I don't know, I think I dressed like I was from Venus or something. I can't remember what my clothes looked like exactly, but it was all the senior girls dressed as something different. It was such a wonderful year, and Guy was so very creative. It was one of the best memories ever there. So yeah. They both graduated from the Vancouver School for the Deaf, and Janine went to Gallaudet University. And Guy decided to stay for 2 more years and work. He worked in a factory on an assembly line, but he wasn't very happy doing that kind of work. And his boss told his father, I'm not really sure that Guy's enjoying his job. It doesn't seem like he does. So he finally left the job, and he went to a department store, and they hired him to do window designs and decoration. And boy, did he really enjoy that. It was a really good fit for his artistic talent, like setting up different window displays. I think he just did that for 1, maybe 2 years. And then NTID opened its doors, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. And he decided that he was going to go there. Do you want to explain more about NTID and Guy or Janine? Or no, I'm good. You can keep going. When he got to NTID, everybody there used speech to communicate. And none of them really knew sign language, and Guy was like, what's going on here? So what he did was he decided to set up a drama group or a club and get them to learn some sign language. If you can imagine, he was the only person signing, and, he didn't want to, just only interact with people who could speak only. This is Ed again. I want to go back to Gallaudet and Janine's experience there. Janine was a freshman, and I was a sophomore, and I played football, and Bob Bolger and I became good friends. And apparently he liked Janine, and they were hanging out all the time together, And then it was Christmas time, and Janine flew home for the Christmas break. And Bob showed a picture of me, and Guy took a look, and they saw a picture of Guy, and she didn't know that he was gay, but we did. And after that vacation, when she came back, she came up to me and she said, "Oh, I didn't know my brother was gay. Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, no. I was being protective of him, So, I just didn't know at that time. It was a different time. Yeah, it was 1966. So, of course, it wasn't as open as it is now. So anyway, at the end of it, the two of us got together, Janine and I did. And then one summer, shortly after that, I went to meet her parents, and Guy was there in Washington State also. And I met him in person. And, a few days later, Guy said, "Let's go out to a bar." And I'm like, "Oh, sure, that'll be fun." So, all right, we went. And as we went into the bar, it was entirely packed with men only. And I didn't think anything of it. And, it was a gay bar, but I didn't know that at the time. And there was one guy who was flirting at me, and he wouldn't stop staring at me. He sat down next to me, and he tried to rub his leg against my leg. And Guy got very protective, and he's like, no, Ed is straight. So, the guy got a little scared, and I wasn't sure what to do about it, but I learned a lot about gay life through Guy's experience and him sharing it with me. So anyway, that's one story. These are pictures from the wedding. That's Susan, my youngest daughter's. She got married in Cabo San Lucas. And those are family pictures. We can show you later everybody in it. But this is the garter that was thrown, and Guy caught it and wore it on his head. That's what that picture is that you see right there. I don't know, there should be more pictures. It was a family event, and it was a celebration of her wedding, my daughter Susan. Yeah, more pictures. Oh, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. Yeah. Hi. Wow, those were interesting stories about Guy. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce David Bourne, or you can, Ed, if you'd like. Yeah, I'd like to introduce David Bourne. He's from the Washington School for the Deaf in Vancouver, also. Oh, hi. Yes. Thanks, Janine and Ed and Philip, for sharing some of Guy's life story. Uh, you see, I sign C on the chin as the name sign, and you can see the picture of Guy doing the same thing. The reason for that is that he grew up using the name Charles, and yeah, I lost my train of thought for a second here. Anyway, he grew up using the name sign Charles, C on the chin, like I just showed you. But when he graduated, he preferred to use Guy, which is his middle name, and he just finger spelled it out instead of an actual name sign. So, but here at the Washington School for the Deaf, we're still in the habit of referring to him by a sign name that matches Charles. But, you know, I thought Guy was his middle name until he passed away, and I realized I'm wrong. It wasn't his middle name. That was actually his first name. And his name is the same as his father's name. His father worked as a bakery instructor at the Washington School for the Deaf also, and his was the same name. So I'd missed that all those years that it was actually his first name. Anyway, so if I sign Guy or C on the chin for Charles, you'll know I'm talking about the same person, Guy, that we're talking about here. So anyway, he was so very popular at the school. Everyone really just adored him, and I looked up to him. He was such an amazing person. He was tall. He always walked with his head up, his shoulders back. He had poise and confidence and walked with that confidence, just a strong presence when he would walk by, and his eyes had this sparkle to them that was captivating. And I just missed those times looking up to him. And when I saw Guy, I would say, hey, hi, David, hi. Hi, Guy. And he would say, hi, David, how are you? And say hi to everybody else too. And if he saw any bullying happening at the school, he would put a stop to it right away and tell them to stop. I think he was such a good role model and leader there at the school, and I remember that fondly. Let's see. When he graduated in 1966, we kept in touch over the years until, let's move you forward in time to 2013. He had already become at that time a world-famous Devia artist by 2013, and the Washington School for the Deaf decided to renovate the Lloyd Auditorium. It was built in 1953, and it was a good time for it to be renovated, and it had no decoration or decor in it, and so they thought it would be a good time to add that to the auditorium. And they asked him to become an artist in residence, and he didn't hesitate for a moment. He took the challenge on, and he set up such an amazing look to the auditorium in Lloyd Auditorium. And he brought his Devia eyes and his hands and his use of ASL, and he was really passionate throughout his life about helping students understand about Devia art and encouraging them in their creativity and, being proud of what it meant to be a deaf person and having the students understand that. And he worked tirelessly to do that. And while they were working on the auditorium, there were so many long days, nights, weekends. They worked from spring until fall. And when the fall came, it was time finally for the newly renovated Lloyd Auditorium to reopen. And it was amazing to see the transformation. All the students had their artwork on display there, and Guy made sure that they had it all set up nicely, and visitors could come and take a look at the artwork, and the students had the opportunity to explain their artwork. It was just such an inspirational evening. And near the end of the evening, they called Guy up onto the stage, and everybody gave him a big standing ovation for his Devilla influence on Lloyd Auditorium. What a good memory that was. Pretty amazing. Of course, we at the school just treasure Guy, and that he's an alumnus of ours too. And he helped with so many different things in the deaf world. And so we nominated him into the Hall of Fame, and probably 2012 was that? I think that's when it was. He was recognized with a special award and inducted into our Hall of Fame, for all his hard work and the artist in residency that he did, and his famous Devilla artwork. We did that in recognition of him, and I really appreciate all his contributions. And then Guy had a passion. He always had this vision that he wanted to continue his passion and bring Devilla art and art in general. And he was trying to think of something to continue that work. And so he wanted a foundation set up to encourage artists to develop their talents, especially at the Vancouver School for the Deaf. And his family has decided to honor his wishes. And they contacted me, and it just happened that I had received funding for DEAF. It's the Deaf Education Advocacy Foundation. And it's a nonprofit organization that supports the Washington School for the Deaf. And we decided, Janine, Ed, and I had a meeting to talk about it. We decided to name it the Guy Charles Wonder Jr. Remember, he's a junior. Memorial Art Fund. And it's been set up, and contributions have been streaming in, and I really appreciate the support that it's given to our students in the Washington School for the Deaf here in Vancouver. I really love and miss Guy, and I miss him. Thank you so much, David. So, thanks for your stories about Guy. Now our journey continues on to Rochester, New York. As you can see, we're on the road, we're driving, and here we are in Rochester. Guy went into NTID in 1968, and Janine and Ed already told the story about him founding the drama club. I myself entered in 1970, and I was a gawky kid of 18. Guy was already 25 years old, and he was experienced in the world and fluent in sign language and confident. And I just enjoyed hearing the stories of his first 25 years. There are so many stories that I could share, but I'm just going to pick an example of it. So when he was a kid, his parents are deaf, as you know, we've said that already, and they took Janine and Guy to a deaf club there, and he got to witness all the drama and the spats and all the different characters that were there in the deaf club, whether it was the woman with the big hair and the chunky jewelry or the old guy smoking a cigar and playing cards. Guy could tell and become those characters. And he was the president of the drama club, and he convinced me to join, and I can't thank him enough for that. He was such a role model, and it continues my love of drama and art and everything. This is different pictures of performances that he was in. In the center is Guy, and the striped shirts there, that's me, little old me, 18 years old, still had hair, a lot more hair than I do now anyway. All right, let's see. And then this one, there's a story about a soldier, and he was the lover of the soldier. And Guy tended to be involved in every facet of theater. He would do makeup and hair and costumes and stage decoration and design. His talents were numerous in all sorts of facets of the theater. There he is, teasing out a wig. Yeah. Okay, next picture. Oh, okay. Now we continue on to New York City. The reason he went to New York City, he fell in love with a blonde actor there and the idea of acting, and that actor convinced him to move to New York City. So let me see, I've got my notes here. Let's see. He lived in New York City from 1971 to 1989. And when I was done with NTID, I transferred to Cornell University, which is much closer to New York City. And many students from Long Island at Cornell would visit their families on the weekends, and I would hitch a ride with them, and they would drop me off in New York City at Guy's home. And Guy lived above a movie theater on the second floor in a loft. And it was such an interesting area, you can only imagine. The windows were huge and arched at the top. The loft ceilings were very, very high, and he could look out his window, or I could too, and we could see all the drama happening on the streets there in Greenwich Village. I got to keep it G-rated a little bit, but you can imagine the characters that were there and what they were doing. Anyway, Guy was an expert at driving around into a wealthy area and finding an alley or street where furniture or items were left on the street, and he would gather them and bring them home and transform them into amazing and beautiful things for his loft. I think he was one of the first street artists, quote unquote. He didn't believe in wasting a thing. He would gather everything from construction sites and any scraps of whatever he found and was able to transfer them into something amazing at home or in the theater, or, everything was from the street basically. It was such a creative and friendly environment too. And if you can think about it, the time it was the 1970s. All he would have to buy when he was making his creation was probably like glue or nails. He was just so clever and amazingly talented. I visited New York City often, and he would take me around, and we would go on our adventures around the city. But one time it might be a piano bar, and then next we would go to a Hispanic bar, or then we would go to a high-end place or a low-end place, or we'd go into the underworld of leather and SM. And I was a kid of 18, so you can imagine how amazing this was to me. It felt like being a kid in a candy store. Let's see my notes here. In 1969, there was a gay and lesbian protest at the Stonewall Inn, and Guy was there. 1 year later, I went to visit, and oh my God, was the transformation shocking. It was anything goes at that point on. Guy would host many parties also when he lived there. I'll describe one of the parties. It was called the Egyptian Party, and his sister was there with her date at the time. It was before she started dating Ed, but Guy fixed her up as Cleopatra, did her hair and makeup, and she had the headdress and great big thick eye makeup, and just looking at her was amazing. And he made her date into a mummy completely wrapped up. And they went to the party dressed as Cleopatra and her mummy, and people were gawking at them most of the night, trying to figure out who they were. Her date, of course, was straight, and he would get into character of the mummy, and nobody could figure out who they were. Uh, Ed was there at the party too, and he thought it was shocking. I think Guy really liked to shock people. So, I didn't expect when I attended the party that I was going to be in costume. So Guy got me all set up and dressed up in a costume. I went as an anthropologist and with the safari hat and camera and all that. There were students from Gallaudet and NTID and local deaf people from New York City. People just really loved interacting with Guy and people at his parties. There's another story of a different party that Guy was at. It was called Alex in Wonderland, and it was held at a warehouse. And Guy wasn't the host. He was there with his hearing aid, taking tickets and working as a bouncer. But he let me in for free. And when I went in, there were almost naked men dancing. And there was fog, disco ball, spinning with the lights. It was just crazy. It was almost like a fantasy sequence come to life. There were also around the perimeter different dark areas, different rooms. And before I went into one of those, Guy took me aside and said, "Give me your wallet. I'll keep it for safekeeping." And he also followed me around to make sure that I was okay going into these different situations. So I have nothing but respect for his care of me. Let's see, what else? Guy's work, he worked as a model. You could see several pictures. They're going to flash on the screen here. So there were two different paths of modeling. One was a nude model. What he did was model for an art class because he wanted to take the art class, but instead of paying for it, he volunteered to model nude, and then he was able to take the class. The other was working fully clothed for fashion photographers who maybe needed work for their portfolios, or maybe they needed somebody wearing a hat. You can see there's a headshot of Guy with that, or maybe a picture of his hands or different body parts. It was really great experience for him, and he got to work and interact with people in the fashion industry. He also worked in fabric design, and he would explain how the positive and negative shapes would fit together, and size and proportion of the pattern on the cloth and everything. And the very famous garment industry in New York, they have the fabric factories there, and they would make it by the bolt. And they also made wonderful wallpaper with the same concept that I was just explaining. Another job, he worked for an interior designer, and the interior designer had clients in the Hamptons, a very wealthy and snobby area. It's a very wealthy end of Long Island, and just huge homes and mansions there. And Guy worked with the interior designer and was able to pick up ideas and tips and how to design things that influenced his work for the rest of his life. So it was a huge benefit for his future. Later on in this program, we're going to show you some of his work, and you can see how the interior design experience benefited him. Guy was very involved in theater. Yes, he did art, but he also was involved with the theater there in New York. The New York Theater for the Deaf was the group that he was most affiliated with. And many of the folks in that group went on to have importance later on, became fairly famous. One example is Mary Beth Miller, who was a comedian. There was also Alan, I have to spell his last name, Barwiolk, Barwiolk. And there was also Charlie McKinney. They became roommates. And there was Juliana Field. We'll see more of her later on. Oh, actually, go back to the previous picture if you would, right there. Yep, right there. So the first person is Jay Blumenfeld. He was famous for his greeting card business in Chicago. And the other person tried printing in New York and printing maps of guides for people in New York. So, and a lot of that became a coffee book which was very successful. And you can see Alan Barwilek, the first person all the way to the left. And then there is Tom McKean. And then there is a woman, it looks like long hair. I think that's Linda Bove. Let's see. She was in the theater, the National Theater for the Deaf. And there's Mary Beth Miller. And that's me on the bottom with the beard and the glasses. And then who else is in the picture here? There is Ann Silver. Oh, wait. Linda Bove. No. Oh, that's Ann Silver. Oh, I'm getting Linda Bove and Ann Silver mixed up. Ugh. Sorry, that was my mistake. My fault. That is Ann Silver, not Linda Bove. Anyway, keep going. Guy in the middle. And then the other person with his hand to his face, I've forgotten his name, but he's from Philadelphia. That was back in the 70s, though, so you have to give me a break. That was 45 years ago. And that's, again, Alan Barlowick. Yeah, that's them in the old days. He and Guy, they were really good friends at the time. And that's Guy in Fire Island. He went there every summer to escape New York for a little bit. Yeah, so much fun there, Whew. So this is a picture of Juliana Field. Many of the people in New York City at that time, that theater group, either moved away or had passed away. And Juliana has since moved to Florida herself, and she contacted me to share her story and some of the stories she has of Guy. Let's see, where are they in my notes here? So Juliana traveled with the National Theater for the Deaf, but her home was in New York. And when she would return back, on one occasion specifically, Guy sat her down and did her makeup and her hair and just really did it all up and put on special clothing for her and everything. So they set up an appointment with the Eileen Ford Modeling Agency and tried to see if they could get Juliana a gig being a model. So she said, sure, why not? Let's go see what we can do. And the staff just took a look at her and were amazed. And then they called Eileen herself, who gave Juliana the once-over, a little bit of scrutiny, actually. And then she said, oh, I'm sorry, dear. You look like a blonde Cher. Good luck with you at another agency, but you're not a good fit for this agency. Thank you. And then she was gone. And Juliana and Guy just looked at each other and said, oh well, we tried. Whatever. Another story that she wanted me to share with you folks is Guy was a wonderful host. His home was a safe haven for so many gay, lesbian, deaf, people with emotional problems, depression, loneliness, anybody. He would invite them over and welcome them warmly into his home, and he tended to serve all of us herbal tea. And then he would sit and listen as they poured their hearts out. And Juliana was one of them as well, who would listen to these stories and provide the support. So that's just another amazing story about Guy. Let's see, what else do I have here? So that was a good experience he had in New York, but so many people started passing away from AIDS, and his life wasn't the same as it was before all that, and he decided it was time to leave New York. So he packed up everything and got a truck, packed it full of his stuff. Instead of driving straight to San Francisco, he decided to take a more roundabout way to get there. And his first stop was Washington, D.C., on his way to San Francisco. You could see the main trip is to San Francisco. But I'm going to let Janine and Ed tell a little bit of the story from Deaf Way in Washington, D.C. Hello? Ed, Janine. It's your turn. Oh, yes. In 1989, there was the Deaf Way at Gallaudet University. There was artwork displayed there in Washington, D.C. as part of that. And Guy made a sculpture of hands. I think somebody has shown you a picture of that, his creation of the 3D artwork of all hands. Chuck Baird had some artwork there too, and there were different artists all around town. And at that time, Guy explained to us that he had been HIV positive since 1981, and he had planned to move to San Francisco to be closer to our family. But the feeling at that time was like, oh, he might not last very much longer. But we thought that was a great idea. His father actually came to Washington, D.C., but their relationship prior to that was a bit shaky. Guy's father didn't really accept him for who he was, but I don't really blame him. His father was of a different generation. He's a product of the 1950s. But when he came to D.C., he was so impressed with the artwork that Guy had done. Their relationship started to improve after that. And I think that was actually the origin of him moving to San Francisco to be closer to us. We lived in Oakland at the time and had 4 young daughters. And Guy was amazing with them. He would come to our home and he would teach the kids art and give them creative ideas, and the children just loved him. In fact, 2 of my daughters have become artists, and the oldest teaches art in a high school, and the other one, my second daughter, Emily, works at a design firm, and mostly she does artwork for them there. The 2 others are really interested in art as well, but it seems that it's been passed on through our family, the love of art. It just runs in our family. And he, while he was there, also renovated a lot of the house. One example was we had a red brick fireplace, and he took that all down. And I was like, we're not going to have a fireplace anymore? And he said, oh, no, we will. And he replaced it with a gas insert. And he did all these creative things with oak and wood for a brand new fireplace. It was beautiful. And he came up with a lot of really wonderful ideas for our kitchen design when we renovated that. So he did so much work around the house, and we appreciate him for that too. Let's see, I think somebody else is going to talk about his work in San Francisco. So I think that's all for now. I think that's it from us. Okay. This is Philip again. So we're done with Washington, D.C., and his journey continued on. Where was his next stop after D.C.? Dallas, Texas, cowboy town. I was living there at the time, and one day, I wasn't sure what I was going to do for the day, and I noticed my dog was acting up and making a lot of loud noise. So I opened the door, and who's standing there? Guy. He wanted to surprise us. And I was like, Guy, what's going on? And I looked behind him and saw his moving truck. He had just put everything in this giant truck. And he came into the house, and the 2 of us sat and chatted and caught up and told him that, he told me about his decision to leave New York City. I fed him, and he showered and, had a restful night overnight. And then he went on his way to California. Let's see. He arrived in San Francisco, as the family just mentioned. And I wanted to introduce Rob Roth. He's a former CEO of Decara. And Guy did a lot of work for him. Rob. Hi. Hello. This is Rob. Guy moved to California, and he wanted to be with his family, Janine and Ed, and their 4 daughters. And he settled in the Bay Area. And the moment he got landed, he immediately started making friends and really started volunteering his time for many nonprofit organizations, services for the deaf, blind, and deaf plus communities, and especially for deaf artists, that sort of organization. Like DVPA, Deaf Visual and Performing Arts, and Philip will talk about that in a little bit. And Deaf Media. He was the artistic director, as you can see here. This was a celebration, 1992 and 1994. That whole time was a celebration. And he did magazine covers for Deaf Life magazine. And what else? One organization that was close to his heart was DCARA, D-C-A-R-A, Deaf Counseling, Advocacy, and Referral Agency. That served the deaf community in California from San Francisco and points north. I was employed by DCARA back at the time, and DCARA was celebrating its 40th anniversary. And we were holding it at a pretty famous hotel, the Mark Hopkins in San Francisco. And Guy took over and accepted the challenge of the decorations, the centerpieces for the tables. And we had no money to decorate with, so he had to do this on the cheap. And as Philip has mentioned before, Guy was an expert at finding things on the street and finding any materials that he might need to make something creative. And he made something fabulous, as you can see from the pictures here. These are hands that he made from corrugated cardboard. And he took those pieces of cardboard and glued them and used red paint and glitter to make these fabulous centerpieces. There were 3 hands that came together in a triangle if you look down on them, but the hands were interlocked with each other. Let's see, I have more notes here. Guy also helped us renovate the Deaf Community Center. It was a gathering place for the community at DCARA. And he painted it new colors, and he got window treatments that were better for lighting and new overhead light fixtures. And for the windows specifically in the stage, he wanted something that was easy for deaf and deaf-blind folks to be able to look at, something that was easy on the eyes. And the DCC room, the DCARA Community Center, really changed and became a lot more welcoming. And now people love going to the DCC, and it's helped our sense of community. Again, it was led by Guy and his ability to find free or cheap objects and materials and transform them into art. And mattress bed springs, for example, the metal coils you've probably seen before. You've probably seen a picture of his flag, a gay pride flag. We're going to show that picture later if you haven't seen it before. And that was incorporated in that. Or he would use lath that was used in old homes. On the inside, they would cover the wooden lath, which were strips of wood, with plaster. And what he did was find old lath, and he would make American flags out of it. And those were the stripes. You're going to see an example of that later on. Brenda Schertz will talk about that. Let's see what else. And there's also the ABC placards and wires. He would use those for his artwork. And things that you can look at, these simple objects you can recognize as Guy's artwork. He had the ability to, what is it called? There's a word for it. Wonderism, like Guy Wonder, but it's wonderism to transform stuff like that. He would use wires and weave them together in a grid form. And in the grid, he used that as a symbol, which is a barrier. But he also felt that the grid was a symbol of opportunities to get through these barriers because of the space between the grids. And the shapes of the wires, he also fingerspelled words with the wire. For example, LOVE or WELCOME, welcome. You're going to see some examples of those later. And he would sign his name, Guy Wonder, with the wire. So, and behind me, you could see one of, not really closely, but you can see that's an example of his work. In the year 2005, I retired as chairman and director of DACARA, and the board of directors honored me with a Guy Wonder artwork. And he knows that I love old classic convertibles from the 1950s. And so the name of this is Integrity. You might not be able to see that, but maybe you can. Integrity at the top is spelled out there. And I just cherish this piece of artwork, and I love that they gave that to me. And I appreciate getting it from DACARA and also from Guy. It just speaks to my heart. Let's see. What else? Lastly, we would get together from time to time and just talk about artwork. And he would share whatever art project he was involved with at the time. And he's just such a sweet person and always found a way to support another person who wasn't as fortunate as he was. And he always supported different deaf artists and individuals and the deaf community in general. And now I would like to introduce Orchid Susani. She couldn't come today because she's working, but she did send me a video. And Orchid is a librarian at the San Francisco Public Library. She's also a wonderful photographer. And here's Orchid. Hello, everyone. My name is Orchid, and I'm one of Guy's friends from San Francisco. And today the topic is about his time in San Francisco, which was about 1989 or 90 to 2006, before he moved to Southern California. And Guy moved to San Francisco to be closer to his family and friends, and he immediately got involved with different organizations. DVPA, Deaf, Visual, and Performing Artists. He was involved in other organizations too. The Oakland Museum, he was a docent there, and he was such a gifted orator. He was just amazing at his ability to tell stories, and it was a natural talent that he had. And let's see what else. I had moved from New York City, and I met him, and Guy was such a wonderful person, and I just looked forward to getting together with him always, and loved listening to his tales, his stories about New York City and his experiences there. Working with Evelyn Zola, for example, or working with senior citizens at the YMCA working out there, just his amazing experiences, so rich with experience from that time in New York. And then in San Francisco, I want to expand a little bit more on the stories of him here. Guy had a studio in a place called Hunters Point here. It's southeast in San Francisco. If you look at a map, it's all the way down in the bottom right corner of San Francisco. It's such a far out place from the center of town, but at that time, oh my gosh, was it sketchy, and now they've renovated the whole area, so it's a much different place. But at that time, there were studios and warehouses there. And they were famous for the twice annual open studios, and people could go and people would show their artwork, and you could do shopping or window shopping, like maybe for a big piece of artwork or a statue or sculpture of some sort or chunky jewelry. People would just come from all over the place to take in everything there. But Guy's building was separate from the other people in the other buildings. He was in building 101, if my memory serves me correctly. But he was neighbors with Don Bear and one other artist. And, what he would do is he would find supplies and make sculptures out of whatever they could find. It was pretty amazing. And Guy always told me that store, it should have been called Scrap, because it was right there where the studios were, but they were famous for finding leftover artist supplies, and you could go in there and buy used or leftover pieces of things so they could make their own artwork cheaper than regular. And I loved, and he loved, the Castro. It's an area here in San Francisco that's famous for its Halloween celebration. Just huge numbers of people. But it's stopped now. It's not as famous or popular as it used to be. But he would much prefer to go to a private party somewhere near, and that's what he would do every year, and get in drag there. And, and then maybe at the end of the party, he would go out with a little group from the party to the Castro. But that's not happening anymore. The Castro isn't, because of safety reason. But anyway, he was famous for joining friends of his. And I really appreciated that part, watching him get ready and his creativity. And then also another thing from that time, we would go to a place called Muddy Waters, like one Friday a month, a few people. It's famous for being a gathering for rainbow folks, and people were just drawn to Guy, and so it was a great place for us to hang out. Guy was an amazing orator. He had a talent for it. It was a natural talent, and he wanted to teach folks, and then he met a lot of deaf adults and artists that way, but he also worked with young kids, and he was so great at working with them and instilling a confidence and pride in their identity as deaf people. I think that was the main reason he was here in San Francisco, to expose deaf artists and expose everyone really to deaf art. So I think that's it. Thank you. Okay. Don't move the slides. Let's stay right there. I know I can't keep up with it. Yeah, let's curb the enthusiasm a little bit. But in New York, he was very involved in theater and just a little bit with art, but it was the opposite here in San Francisco. He was very involved in artwork and didn't do much theater here. He was the first president of Deaf Visual Performing Artists. There's Don Baird, who is famous for wax sculptures, and let's see, Guy's there, and Ken is the person with the necklace, and it's hard to see anybody, but I need thicker glasses, I think. Anyway, Guy just loved having discussions about art with folks. And next to him is Igor. I'm not going to remember how to spell his last name. It starts with a K. It's a Polish last name. And then there is Derek Nunn. the three of them were great artists at the time, and it gave them the opportunity to have discussions with them. And Guy loved mentoring and supporting folks. And yep, next slide, please. Oh, wow, that's such a huge number. They're all artists. One that I must point out is, for example, Guy is my role model, in art and theater and all that, at college level and above. He was my mentor. But when I was a kid before that, I have a deaf cousin, Evelyn Zola. You can see her with the big thing on her head, her fashions, She was the first deaf Auntie Mame. I wanted to point her out. Let's see. Yeah, there's just other groups that he would talk with, young artists, and I forget names. I'm so sorry. And Guy often hosted tours. He was a docent for different museums in the area. In New York City, he would go to the Met, but here he would go to the Oakland Museum and others. And you could see somebody listening to him be a docent and tell the stories about different pieces of art, the background and all that. He just was very into telling his stories. That's another led tour. So DVPA folks would like to go to galleries or different places, sometimes libraries, and expose people to art. He tried to give deaf artists a sense of pride and make them feel that they have an opportunity to network. So he was just great. I was kind of his right-hand man some of the time, but, there's more examples of Guy. Oh my gosh, I'm so fat in this picture. That's me. And the president of that group, I was president of that group, and the other guy is an interpreter who's standing there getting ready for an event that was there at the library that was held. So continue on to the next one. Oh, yep. This was DVPA fundraising gala. It was themed The Great Gatsby, and that's why the costumes look so weird. But the president gave him an award to recognize Guy's contribution to, he was the contributor of the year for all the work that he did with different organizations. And he loved getting awards and being at these things. That's a picture of him with his award. Hello, on to the next slide, please. Click, move, hello. I'm going to go ahead, but he did a lot of artwork while he was there in San Francisco. In New York, he did constructed items, he did modeling, he did that sort of thing. In San Francisco, he focused completely on making his artwork. And remember I mentioned the Hamptons before, that he worked with the interior designer and learned some tips? Well, I'm an architect, and I would finish and have 90% of a project constructed, and then I would have Guy come in and do the interior design, give the last 10% to the project, give his finesse as a final touch, the wow factor to the design. And he did some of our homes that we designed and built. He did such a beautiful job, just amazing. Couldn't be more impressed with his work. Janine and Ed would like to talk a little bit about his San Francisco time, I think. So Janine, Ed. Hello, Ed, Janine. Did you want to say something about San Francisco? Okay. Stories about what? Ed's asking. I'm not sure what we're supposed to talk about. But anyway, in San Francisco, I just remember he had an apartment there in San Francisco. Is that, maybe you've told all your story. This is Philip again. Maybe you've told all your story. What did you want me to talk about? But that's up to you. Did you want to talk about anything else? You mentioned his work at Hunter's Point, the studio. So I think that's, Orchid talked about that. So I think that's it. But I'll mention he moved to Palm Springs. I'll have some comments a little bit later when we talk about that part of it. Okay? Sound good? Okay. All right, bye for now. Bye, Janine. Bye, Ed. Next, I would like to introduce Domingo Guyton. He was Guy's old roommate. What a wonderful video he's made. He wasn't able to attend today, but can we show Domingo's video? Hi, my name is Domingo Guyton, and I'm from San Francisco. And I met Guy through my ex. And I had an interview with him to see if we would be compatible as roommates. And I did end up offering him to become our roommates. And we lived together for 7 years. He was an amazing cook, and he could clean like nobody's business and keep the yard too. He built us a gazebo in our yard, like just wooden, and the way he made it look, it was almost like a cabin out there. Just amazing. The floor was wooden as well. He just did all this hard work around the place here, and that's what I can say again and again, is that he's a hard worker. He worked with wires and wood and just made all sorts of artwork from it. I love his designs and his artwork. He showed me how he incorporated deaf culture into that, and he rented a room, also a space in a warehouse for a studio where he could do his artwork. And he would be there almost every day. And sometimes he would stay overnight there, sleep overnight if there was some special art project happening or something opening soon thereafter. But I would love having dinner with him, or lunch or breakfast, and when he would talk about his life. And it was just amazing to hear his life stories. And he was a model for a while, and he showed me pictures of it, and I couldn't have been more impressed. His eyes were just amazing, and he had dimples, and just such beautiful pictures from that time too. Also his family too. He had pictures of them. His work in college, and he just loved working and having things to do. So he always had projects going, and he never stopped to rest. I just enjoyed living with him, the way he was in the world, and he was a happy person, and he had a happy life, and it was nice to be around. And I learned a lot about how to cook from him. He tried to teach me how to do artwork too, but that's a much harder task for me, just if you can imagine. I can't do it with his natural talents, and there's no competition. He just never stopped making art. And in fact, I'm going to show you some of his artwork. These are things that he made on the walls behind me here, you can see. I love his style of art, the things that he made. They're my favorite art pieces of all time. So I just wanted to say thank you, Guy, for that contribution to me. And I want to say to everybody else, I'm sorry, Guy's sister and brother and nieces and nephews and, everybody else, best friends and everybody. So many of his friends from his life. I'm sorry for all your loss too. He was such a sweetie, and I had a dog and a cat, and he just took such good care of them. And I wanted to thank him specifically for that. He liked to take my dog out for a walk, and when I was at work. So that was, something nice he did, for example. And one time he came to me and asked me if he could have a party, a farewell party. And it was because he was moving to Palm Springs. And I said, of course, invite who you will. The more the merrier. And we had a goodbye party for him that was very special. for his move to Palm Springs. Really enjoyed that party, and I miss him so much. I would just like to give big thanks to Guy for so many things, and he was an amazing person. So, yep. It's a long, hot drive to Palm Springs. Anyway, why did Guy move to Palm Springs? There were a few reasons. There was amazing HIV support services there. There was a good deaf community there and good gay community as well. Also, many of the folks that were there are older, more in his same age group. San Francisco was more young folks and energetic people, that are still working. It was a different lifestyle, and Palm Springs seemed to fit Guy's stage in life. And Guy's sister Janine came with him, and he had no idea where to go and drove them around and recommended settling in Cathedral City Cove. They thought that was the best area for him because there was gay folks buying fixer-uppers in the area at the time, and it was still affordable compared to other areas in Palm Springs that were ridiculously expensive. And with Guy's creativity and decoration skills and being able to work, he was able to fix these houses up. And eventually his father joined him as his roommate. Janine and Ed are going to explain a little bit more about that in a minute. So, wait. Later. Not yet. Sorry. While he was in Palm Springs, he worked for the Coachella Valley Repertory Theater. Yes, that was the name of it. CVRT. He did stage and set design and built the stage sets and all that sort of thing. And he had one or two co-workers who were deaf that made it easy for him to communicate with. But probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, actually, this happened. My husband and I went to dinner for a dinner party, and we met the boss from the theater, the Coachella Valley Rep Theater. His name was Ron. I don't remember his last name, but he said, "Oh, you're deaf? Do you know Guy Wonder? Oh, he was such an amazing guy. He was so wonderful. He worked so hard, just so creative and sweet, and he couldn't say enough. I miss him so much." And that really made an impression on me. How nice to hear that. Let's see. The next slide, please. Oh, yes. That's the Coachella Valley Repertory Theater fundraiser. And that's Guy at the one end. And at the other end, the guy with the big white hair is Mel Koppler. He was a retired professor from CSUN's National Center on Deafness. And in the center is a fairly famous actor. He's a celebrity, Gavin MacLeod. He was in an old TV show, The Love Boat, and he was the captain. You can imagine him with a captain's hat on and all that. He was also on the Mary Tyler Moore show as well. He's passed away recently as well, but he really supported the Coachella Valley Repertory Theater, and Guy, of course, was just fascinated to be around all these people too. So anyway, next slide. Oh, yes, that was his 70th birthday party. Yeah. we gave him this crown to wear, this headdress. Yeah, and that's him blowing out the candles on his cake, of course. Oh, yeah. His sister Janine and Ed Layton, giving him the cake. Oh, yeah. We founded the Deaf Senior Citizens Foundation of Palm Springs. And this is a fundraiser. People came in costume for it. You wore like different hats and stuff. They were famous for Easter bonnet competitions and Halloween, especially Halloween. This is just one example from a Halloween gala. And this is Guy as an AIR, an artist in residence. He was at the Rochester School for the Deaf, and then he was at the Washington School for the Deaf in Vancouver, and locally. He was just invited to be the artist in residence at different areas and share his rich experience and artwork and describe not just his own artwork, but encourage and mentor young artists. And that's pictures of him doing that. He very much enjoyed using his theatrical experience and his gifted sign language. And yeah, that's just examples of him doing that. Again, same thing. Yep, more of the same. Oh, yes. This is another Halloween party. He was so creative, and he was able to make himself half female, half male. Just an amazing costume. There's a close-up of it. So gifted. Okay, let's see who's in this picture. At the very end is Guy. The next person over is Dick Hill. And then what's this other person's name? Chris Roberts. He's from Pennsylvania. But he's here now in Palm Springs. Let's see. And the other person's name is Michael. He lives in Berkeley now, I think. I don't know who the other person is, but the very last one, that's me in yellow. This is a picture. Remember Rob told us about the Dakara, how Guy made the centerpieces out of almost nothing. He did the same thing for the Deaf Senior Citizen Advocacy of Palm Springs. The 3 stars that were part of that night up on the stage that you can see, it looks so elegant. The 3 stars represented the 3 deaf women who became famous through Hollywood. The first was Marlee Matlin. Next was Linda Bove. And the third was Juliana Field. Juliana Field won an Emmy. There was an Italian award from New York to Linda Bove, and Marlee Matlin won the Oscar. And the centerpieces, the bowls there, they were just amazing. There were little gardens and bowls that Guy created and made, just amazing. And people were like, oh, I want this. But how we decided who would get it is we put a sticky piece of paper underneath everybody's chair, and whoever had that piece of paper was the one that got to bring home the bowl. So he did such an amazing job, as I said. Let's see, what else do I have here? One more story about Halloween. I promise it's my last one. But this is a funny one. So at a restaurant, there was a private room for a deaf gathering for Halloween one year. Barbara Gorman hosted the event. She was the chairperson for that event, the fundraiser Halloween party. And Guy went as a skeleton. He had a mask on and a costume that was bones on his hands and arms and his torso. And his deaf father was in a wheelchair, and Guy made him up to look like Barbara Bush, with the white hairdo and the big beads and an old woman's dress. And it was really funny because Guy wheeled in his father, and they were a little bit late because Guy was taking his time with the makeup and hair and all that stuff. And they went into that private room, and people stopped him thinking they were both hearing people. And they said, "This is for deaf people only. Deaf, we can't hear." And then we were shocked to learn. Some of us knew, we were laughing hysterically, but other people finally figured it out. "Oh my God, that's Guy. And that's his father." Oh my God, was everybody shocked. It was hysterical. Let's see, what else? Two more things and then I'll wrap it up. The HIV support group we had, and we had that every Wednesday. And Guy and myself and one other guy would get together after the support group. And when it was done, we'd go out to dinner. And that was Wednesdays. And very frequently, we would just, for hours, just sit there. "Oh my gosh, do you remember that experience? And remember when Guy did this? And the Fire Island and the Hamptons." And just, oh my gosh, such enjoyable times, good memories. I miss those gatherings on Wednesdays. And then the other is the wedding. My husband and I got married 8 years ago, and two folks were our witnesses. They're from RIT, NTID. The first, of course, was Guy Wonder, and the second one was Sven. The two of them I've known for, 40-ish years. Over 40 years ago that we met, and they felt honored to be the witnesses for our wedding. So that's a nice memory too. So I think I'm done with my portion of it. And to wrap it up, what a wonderful life. And we are so very fortunate to have had a big part in his life. Even though he and I came together at different times and then we were apart, but we still were always very supportive of each other and friends. And I miss him so much and love him and always will. So now, to wrap up, let's bring Ed and Janine if there's anything they want to say before we go on to the next part about his artwork. Do you folks want to say anything? Ed, Janine? Oh, Janine left just a moment ago. She'll be back soon, but I can wrap this up. Guy was an amazing person, as has been said. And when he moved to San Francisco, the expectation was that he wasn't going to live a lot longer. But I think he was one of the longest survivors of HIV. I don't know. Maybe he continued on for such a longer because God wanted the gift of him to be able to work and teach other artists and do workshops and work with deaf young artists. So maybe that's why he lasted so long. Also, his father and they had a much better relationship than they did, all the way to the end. So our family is going to really miss him. We miss him a lot already, and he gave us so much. What an amazing guy. And we really, really miss him. All of us do. And thanks for your time and taking a look at our program today. Thanks, Ed. Thank you so much. If we could go back to this slide, there's one last comment, and then that'll lead into his artwork, his artistic life. So there's one story behind this, and then I'll turn it over to Brenda. So the wire that you see there represents the cochlear implant. That was the concept behind this piece of art. It's the big loop there, and then the long electric cord, the science behind it, drilling into the ear bone and all that, and just throwing all sorts of junk and everything into the ear. It was sort of his tongue-in-cheek way of talking about the cochlear implant, and that all that metal work, was that going to get rusty? I don't know. He was just being tongue-in-cheek about it. So that's why he made this piece of artwork. I just thought that was funny. So it's a little bit of whimsy. And I think that's a good lead in to Brenda Schertz. And she's going to talk more about Guy's artwork. And that'll be showing different examples of what he's done. We've honored his life's journey and focused on that for most of this program, but now Brenda will take it over and talk about his artwork. Hello, everyone. Hello, and thank you. Wow, what beautiful stories about Guy's life. And I saw all the messages in chat also. So I met Guy the first time in 1999. I had heard so much about him before that, of course, and his work with Davia. And Guy was such an amazingly talented artwork, and he did crafts, really good with that. He was able to make furniture and all sorts of other designs. Janine and Ed had their home transformed by him as well. He was very supportive of other deaf artists, and he led tours. He mentored artists. And Guy's talent was as Ed and Janine mentioned about their daughters. You could see some of the pictures of him when he was a little kid, when Guy was a little kid. That's Guy with his grandmother, who was also an artist, which is a small world. Yep, more. And that's his grandmother passed the artwork on to Guy, and he passed that on to Janine and Ed's daughter. And she is an artist in Oakland, California. And that's what she looks like. She's an art teacher. And she has a master's in fine arts as well. Obviously, Guy has had a strong influence on the family, you know. And his family has been involved in artwork and everything. And it's very interesting. He also helped make a eucaustic collage. For example, it's different layers that you put on the collage, and he was very talented at that. I want to show you some of his artwork, other artwork. Oh, yes. Yeah. You can see his rainbow flag here, and we saw that a while ago when we were talking about Dakara. You could see the bed springs that are woven in as part of that, and the pride that he had as being a gay man is shown with the rainbow flag, and his artwork is just amazing to me. Rob Roth also mentioned the ABC cards that he found and would rip into pieces and put as part of his artwork. You know, it's a Guy Wonder artwork. There's the wire grid behind it, and then also the artwork on the right is a collage also. So the ABCs was one way of showing, you know, deaf pride, you know, from past history, and he would put that in his collages, his artwork. His work was many found items, and he would turn them into collages. You know, he would use canvas and paper and metal. Let's show you some more. Okay, the American flag that you see here, he made many different American flags. He made the rainbow, and he made the rainbow flag, but then also these 3 American flags are examples. He would give these to family and friends or sell some of them. And one of the artworks, it's a smaller version of it, 2 smaller ones on the side. Philip Rubin has that one. And the NTID asked him to make the giant American flag that you see here. And it's a large version of it, and that's at NTID. The artwork has the interwoven fingers because of the sign for America. You know, maybe America started because of the split log fences that were woven together like that. You know, maybe it's because of deaf folks coming together. I don't know. It's different ways of signing with the fingers interlocked. So I think he was trying to show through his artwork in a 3D way, and ASL is also 3D, so I think he was trying to honor that by making his artwork like that. It's very beautiful to me. And when Guy would talk about it, deaf people would be like, deaf people felt like, oh yes, we understand that. But hearing people like, that looks like a messed up American flag. So they would have a more negative view on it, and deaf people would have a more positive view on it. So next I can show you another picture that Guy made. Yep, that's a sculpture that he made. Guy made the hand sculpture. Ed and Janine talked about that when he was in Washington, D.C. He was there for Deaf Way, and that was the first one. Deaf Way 1 was in 1989, and it was an important year for deaf art. And Guy was one of the originators of the artists that got together and came up with a concept of the DeVia Manifesto. DeVia stands for Deaf View Image Art. DeVia we've had deaf artists, in the deaf experience forever, but nobody had actually codified it and put it into a document until 1989, when the group of artists got together and created the DeVia Manifesto. And the hand wave, he made that for Deaf Way at Gallaudet. That was his art exhibit, the sculpture that he made with all the hands. And let's see, what else did I want to talk about? So we've shown you a lot of the artwork, but there's also a website that we're showing you here with more stories about his life. And also, you probably have your own stories that we would like you to add. Guy lived such an amazing life. You can't tell it all in such a short time, but you have more of those stories. You have pictures of his artwork, and you can see more of them here on the website that we're scrolling through. And if you have any guy's artwork that's not yet on the website, please let us know, and we can add that for you if you'd like. Or if you feel you have a story, or you've bought a piece of artwork from him, let's just add to this website. I just feel like he was such a humble man, and I feel like stories and artwork, if we add to that, it's going to really show a larger collection of his work and more representative of him. He was so beautiful. His artwork was beautiful, and he was so creative. He contributed so much. And there's, you can add on the area of the website that says add to Guy's story. Just click there, and it'll allow you to upload things there. And if you would, in the chat, if somebody could put the website link in there, please, to show people where to click on, that would be wonderful. And and they'll have the website address there. So thank you so much. And back to Philip. Yay. Great job, Brenda. Thank you. Well, Guy, do you feel satisfied with everything that's gone on today and our wonder and honor of you and the stories and everything? Thank you, and we love you. I love all of you, and thank you for watching and coming today, and have a wonderful day.